Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another tutorial. Today we'll be talking about how to kind of like layer your pads with other instruments, or basically just layer instruments in general to make a full sounding mix, but at the same time not making it sound muddy. Alright, let's go ahead and preview this track, but right before we preview the track, I want to do a big shout out to Jack, or aka Nurko. He's basically the one who helped me out with this and taught me everything that I'm about to share here. So big shout out to him. And all credit goes to him. But yeah, let's go ahead and go into the preview of this track. Alright, so basically this is actually, I had a request to try to like recreate the pads from 7 Lines Strangers. So initially the first pad is kind of like a recreation of it, kind of similar but not exact. But then after that we just kind of like go in and do our own thing. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into like each layer for this particular track. So this is what the first pad sounds like. And then we basically have like an atmosphere with it, and then some bass. We'll get right into the like serum and what's inside. But basically, yeah, it's very simple. Basically just like one saw wave and then one basic shape. It's a sine wave basically. Just a different bend here. See, like that basically. And the reason why we decided to do like the bend was because when you have a sine wave, it's kind of like it has a lot of like strong like lower frequencies. So that's the reason why the bend was here. Because if we do this, it gets less muddy basically. And that was basically the idea. And I think that's really, there's some hyperdimension here, and then there's also like some EQ basically. Same idea, just kind of taking out the frequencies that we don't really need. And then we also enabled a sub here with a saw wave. But yeah, and then after that, there's actually an auto pan here, kind of like making it less static and more of like, you know, movement in the pad. So it's without the auto pan and then with. Very, very subtle, because we basically just did like the rate at 1, so it's not like anything too crazy. But yeah, it's just to kind of give some movement for the pad. And I'll kind of show you like the reason why we inverted it, because we actually did the same thing on the next pad on the next 8 bars. Just doing it on the other side, just to kind of, you know, have a bigger, like, you know, wider sound with, you know, again, more movement. And then basically the EQ here, just, you know, basic, cutting out the hundreds or anything below hundreds, and then, you know, EQing this area because it's quite heavy there, especially because the sine wave and stuff like that. And then just kind of like closing this just to kind of match the other sound more from the pad from 7 Lines Strangers. So yeah, it's more, you know, nothing really from the high frequencies. And then next up we have the next pad, which sounds like this. And then together they kind of sound like this. Inside the silence, basically really simple stuff. Basically 8 voices, a saw wave, about 10 o'clock in the D tune, and then another saw wave with 6 voices, but this time a little less on the D tune to kind of make it sound more condensed. And then I also added a tri-saw here. Yeah, this one right there, 5 voices, more condensed again. Changed the phase just so it can kind of like play a different area of the wave, and then lessen the volume to kind of blend it together basically. Have a filter for both at 24 dBs just to cut out the higher frequencies because we don't really need it. And that's basically it for that, because yeah, if we were to, you know, turn this on, it'd be kind of like started sounding like a saw basically, so hence why we do the low pass there. And that's really it. A little bit less than the cutoff too, same idea, just so I can make it more calm, then less aggressive basically. But yeah, again, the auto pan, this time normal, kind of the same settings. But this time it's not inverted, so that way, again, when you combine the two together, it sounds like a more wide sound with more movement. I'll just show an example just in case. So this is basically without the auto pans. And then with the auto pans. Yeah, so very subtle, but you can kind of feel a little bit of movement basically. And then same idea with EQ. We're basically cutting out everything below 100 because we don't need that. And then dipping out this area again, just so we can make more room, or it's pretty high up in that area. So putting it down so that way it doesn't like make the mix all muddy and overpowering in that frequency range. And then we have a S1 imager, which is basically just kind of like a spreader basically, or just basically spreads the sound a bit more. And then some reverb, different preset and stuff like that. Oh yeah, forgot to go over the bass layer too. This one plays at the first verse. It's a very simple bass here. That's what it sounds like. And it's just a triangle wave or something like that from the basic shapes here, playing at a different position. And then some cutoff, a lot of drive to kind of make it sound fatter, and then 24 the cutoff, and then a compressor. Basically, I think the reason why we added the compressor is because the volume was like bouncing, back and forth a lot, so the compressor kind of like doesn't make it do that. Yeah, and basically, both these areas are cut off just to make room for that bass, because that's where the frequencies of the bass is going to be making up for it. Yep, and then up next we have is piano. It's the grandeur piano, made it a bit more soft, close the lid, turn up the volume all the way, just because it was kind of low. And then velocity is lowered down, as well as there's a bit of a strum as well. As you can see here, not all of them are playing at the same time, just to kind of make it more human and realistic and organic. As you may have seen from the NCS walkthrough, you don't always have to do the velocity like this. It's basically doing it for a certain purpose. Like if you want a more triumphant, or whatever the word is, just like the walkthrough, then you could, make the velocity all higher because you want, the piano to hit more powerful and stuff like that. So, but yeah, in this case, we just kind of wanted more somber and human and organic, basically. And yeah, these are the chords. Basically, the piano is playing a bit of a different chords, because we added these notes here, while the pads are playing these notes here. So yeah, basically, this you may have seen from my other tutorials. This time I decided to add the 1 and 5, just playing throughout the whole entire chords, and then I just kind of like added notes to taste, basically. Usually like notes that are within the chord or suspended, such as there and stuff like that. So yeah, that's that really for the notes. Going to the piano processing, just kind of did some saturation, just to kind of make it warmer. Basically, you can, I think Nurko or Jack used Saturn. I don't have Saturn, so I just tried, using a different type of saturation. And then EQ here, basically same idea here, taking out frequencies below 100, and then actually for pianos, probably for the most part, I don't know about all of them, but a good amount of them, usually the frequency here could be pretty harsh. So just gonna usually you want to put that area down there, and then basically using this like piano centric, that'll kind of show you what it does without it. And here. Just kind of brings it up again. And then basically just some utility to bring up some of the volume, just because when you lower down the velocity, it gets kind of quiet. So this basically just to kind of match the volume with the pads and stuff like that. Additionally, we also panned the piano to the left and then the pad to the right. Same idea, kind of like making it more of like a wider stereo effect. And then yeah, basically with everything together, again, sounds like this. Have some snare here. I'm not really going to go over too much how to make percussions because it's more like a mixing tutorial. So we can do that for another tutorial. I also forgot that the atmosphere here, I did the same thing, just kind of like, you know, taking everything below 100. It was kind of harsh here, so I brought that down. Felt like we didn't really need any of the frequencies up here, so I just you keep those out. So we're just going to move on to the next layer here. Sounds like this again. So we add some more instruments. Basically, we have a string here. Same idea. I did the saturation, also the EQ again, lowering everything that was there just because like it gets pretty muddy, as you can see here. I'll turn those off. Yeah, see, if we didn't do the EQ, it would make the mix really freaking muddy. So especially when you're stacking this many instruments, you know, so yeah. So yeah, you can kind of like already hear like how it's a bit muddier, but imagine like if we didn't have that type of EQ for all the instruments, it would, you know, sound pretty muddy. So yeah, that's basically that in terms of like the processing there. And then we have an omnisphere string, basically. So dark and moody, like string orchestra that basically just put down the attack all the way so it can play right away. Yeah. And it sounds kind of like weird on its own because it like just happens so quickly, but it definitely like. But when you play it together, like it sounds normal or just fine. And then we have another string, same idea. I actually just use a different type of saturation this time. I just tried the decapitator, very light saturation because I put down the mix too, and just tried a different like style. And then same idea with the EQing. You know, putting that lower, cutting out the 100s, and actually this string I think is playing at a different octave. Well, it definitely does sound like it's playing at a different octave, but at least in the chord sense, it's playing in the same octave. But I think this might be playing at a, yeah, this one might be playing at a lower octave just because of the plugin does that, perhaps. Yeah. And then this string here is the Hollywood studio string section. I think we did the same idea with the attack, yeah. And then again, also pan the other strings to the right, and then also this one to the left. And the volume for this one was a bit lower. Wanted to be a bit more subtle, basically. And then we have another string here. Same idea here, cutting out whatever and lowering this. And then the idea behind this string was just to add kind of like some texture rather than like really being a string itself, because it has this like shaking tremolo thing. Jack used a Hansheimer strings, which I don't have, but definitely want to get that string in the future. And it added a lot of texture, so I basically just try to do something similar. This time I used a Contact, I think it was library, or yeah, Contact string ensemble. Just set it to tremolo, and yeah, probably I think I put the attack all the way down too. And then I think I did the same string, or actually did the violins too. Tremolo again, and just kind of made it up an octave, so it's just kind of like more atmospheric. Same idea, kind of like adding more texture. And then same thing with the drums. Again, we're not really gonna like dive deep into like how to make percussions and stuff, but the percussions have the same, you know, idea of, you know, mixing, so that way it doesn't like, you know, have any frequencies that we don't need. Like everything's like cut below 100, for example. You've probably seen this in my build-up tutorial, but this is like all this, the mid-side, the sides are cut off below 100 too. And then yeah, that's pretty much that for the EQing for the drums and stuff. Yeah, everything's basically just cut out, so that way you can make room for things that are needed in those frequencies, so they don't clash and stuff like that. And then lastly, we have a guitar. It sounds like this. This guitar, I would say, is more for the most part mostly processed, but not entirely just yet. So we can definitely do a guitar processing video on another one. So I'm not really gonna go too crazy on this, you know, processing and stuff like that. But it's, you know, very similar idea. Again, you know, you're cutting out everything below 100, dipping where it's pretty, you know, pretty high. So that way you can like make room for the other stuff. But yeah, the only thing that's different for the guitar is this Neutron 3 here, because basically the guitar had some frequencies that was kind of like, you know, overpowering the pad a little bit, and we kind of wanted to bring out the pad more on the, in terms of like mixing it together better. So basically this is what the Neutron 3 did, is basically we're inputting the pads here, and then basically just kind of like EQing again where the guitar was like most overwhelming in terms of frequencies, and then lowering those out. So basically what you would do is around the 729 frequency range is where it was kind of, you know, overpowering a little bit, or making it a bit muddy. So you basically just kind of set it around there, and then lowering the gain to, you know, where you feel is best sort of taste, and then basically also like enabling the dynamic, and then also sidechain, and then same thing here basically. Same idea, yeah, the 200 frequency range, lowering to the gain as needed, threshold, sidechain. And basically, you know, the whole idea is basically just to mix the guitars in a bit better with the pads, compared to like if we were to just slap a EQ on the whole entire master, for example, or a group, it wouldn't really do the same thing. Because with the Neutron 3 you can be a bit more surgical, because this time we're just kind of like, you know, mixing in with the pads specifically. And yeah, it's basically like what it sounds without the Neutron 3, and then with, and then without. Yeah, you can definitely like hear, like when you turn off the Neutron, especially the areas we didn't EQ in there, you know, it gets a little bit, you know, a bit more louder or overpowering a little bit in the, you know, in terms of you know, the pad versus the guitar. But when you turn it on, it kind of calms down those frequencies. That's the great thing about this plugin, and it's you know, you can get it on Splice. It's like rent to own, just like the Serum, for like $9.99 a month for something like that. So I found it to be worth it. But yeah, that's that. And then one thing with the pad too, what was a thing that you may want to consider, especially if you have like a sine wave, you know, because it can get pretty overpowering when you're using a sine wave in terms of lower frequencies. Was Jack used the Fabfilter using the dynamic EQ, because at times, like especially when it was hitting the lower notes into chords, it became a little overpowering only in some areas, and that's where the dynamic EQ from Fabfilter could come in, where it only, you know, it only EQs at certain times when it's needed to be. I don't have the Fabfilter, which is why I didn't do it, but that's definitely something that you can take a look into. And then yeah, everything in terms of volume too, just like mixing the volume is very important too, I feel like, because like basically we have this like main pad here, and then everything just kind of like accompanies it. Basically nothing is like super louder, nothing is like super quieter, and if it is quieter then there's a certain reason for it, like it's, you know, more atmospheric or something like that. So like, you know, this is the main instrument here, and then we layered this pad, very like a, you know, similar volume. Same with the piano, and then same thing with the strings. And then these strings here too, and these strings, and then same thing with drums or percussions, and then the atmosphere as well, guitar, bass. So yeah, like everything was like just really, you know, leveled and stuff like that. And then we also have like a very, you know, very not like crazy sidechain using the compressor. So the compressor basically, it's not really a sidechain tutorial, but just kind of like quickly going over it. You know, the trigger is this hi-hat, very short sample that I just threw in here. And then, yeah, again, very subtle. Compared to like using the LFO tool one that you may have watched in, like, you know, if I were to use it, you know, play a drop, for example, that's when I would use the LFO tool for a more of like aggressive sidechain. But yeah, since we're not, you know, we don't really need that in this particular part at least. But yeah, some final notes basically, you know, to kind of like progress through this track more, I would say, for the next part, which is the breakdown or the chorus, you know, take out a lot of the instruments and maybe just leave a pad or a bass, you know, really situational and kind of like whatever sounds best, you know, to make a nice transition to let the audience know that this is like, you know, the breakdown or the chorus. And then transitioning to the build-up, you can start adding some more, you know, instruments back in, as well as adding new elements, like, for example, like a pluck, for example. And then for the next 8 bars, you can introduce all the instruments back again, kind of like building up to that drop. And also this track is obviously missing like a top melody or top line. So that's definitely something, you know, you would need to incorporate to kind of like make this track a bit more compelling, or basically just kind of like, you know, completing the track, because again, obviously it's missing something up there. And then, you know, in terms of EQing, if you had a vocal, for example, you might need to EQ some of the group layers or something like that, or certain instruments to make room for the vocal processing. Really depends. And that will definitely probably be for maybe another video sometime in the future. I do plan to do a video on vocal processing, perhaps, you know, again, maybe in the future, we'll see. And then yeah, but nonetheless, you kind of have like the basic foundation of just kind of like how to EQ and, you know, mix your instruments together and stuff like that. But yeah, I think honestly that's going to be it for this tutorial. Thanks so much for watching. If you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you liked the video, hit the bell notification symbol so you know when my next video goes live. And also please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't yet. Also follow me on my social medias, TikTok, Instagram, stuff like that. And then also join the Discord server. I'm looking to create a community of like-minded individuals where we can all kind of like help each other improve in our producing, you know, kind of like share our own personal journeys and stuff like that, perhaps, to kind of like, you know, all help each other out and stuff like that. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely join the Discord. I will leave all the links in my description below. Thank you so much again for watching. And until next time, much love. Peace out.